I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Say things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook baby.
All right. Here we are. Is this episode 120?
120, yeah.
120. All right, 120. We're joined by Michael David Cobb Bowen, who we met through Free Black Thought, which you should follow Free Black Thought and Michael on Twitter. That's how we met. And yes, we still call it Twitter. I always will. So Michael has a Substack. He has many titles that I'm sure he will share with us. I think we're going to talk about a bunch of different topics today. And also Michael joins us from California. I asked Joe why he lives there by choice. As I said, I'm East Coast. Michael, do you have an answer for why you choose to live in
it's
Southern
actually not
California?
my choice. I've lived all over the country, and if I had my ways, I'd be living in Texas. But it's my wife's choice. She said wherever the girls have their babies, that's where we're living. Period.
All right, yeah, you got to pick your battle. So that makes sense.
I can't complain.
All right, so we want to discuss a number of topics. Let's just get into it.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, for lack of a better term, is it Black Elites, art with Black Elites? I don't know, Michael.
Yeah, let's do that.
I know that's something you've written about recently.
Yeah, I'm gonna have fun today. I'm generally more of a stuff shirt because people want to hear the stuff. But I think I like film guys. I like culture guys. You guys are ready to be on the wild side sometimes and just let it roll.
Yeah.
So let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So you guys have read some of my stuff.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to talk about American fiction. And I remember when it first came out, my friend Wink Twyman, and we do a podcast together too. He said, "Have you seen it? Have you seen it? I want to compare it to Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun." And that represented where Black ambitions were in the late 50s and early 60s. Mm-hmm. And I think this one is what we've updated. We want to replace the Lorraine Hansberry where, dad dies, leaves $10,000. They live on the south side of Chicago and they want to live to move to a nice house where they already have mom and dad, brother and sister, and brother's wife and son living in this one apartment. And so let's do the American dream. Yeah. And American fiction is a kind of American dream show too, but kind of gone wonky. And so anything by Jeffrey Wright, I kind of make a time to go see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Terrific
actor. Somebody asked me, who would do, if you had a biopic, what actor would you like to do you? And I said, well, it would have to be Jeffrey Wright or Chiwetel Ejiofor. Or the guy Harry Phoenix or Harry Lennox, who played the guy who got burned in the second Matrix.
Okay. It's been a while.
Yeah, he also did the one with the guy who did Sex, Lies, and Videotape. 80s actor. He played a snarky attorney in Boston. James Spader.
Yeah, James Spader. Sex, Lies,
and Videotape. Spader has the new crime series, and he's the FBI boss.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, that's Lennox.
I see.
Yeah, I remember him.
He's Morpheus's boss in the Matrix too, and they both go after the same girl, and he got spurned.
And for comic book movie fans, he was also in Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, and Justice League. So yeah,
who gives a shit?
Yeah,
those aren't even the good ones.
I know.
Well, he also played the guy in the Shakespearean adaptation by Julie Taymor.
Titus.
Yeah. That was my favorite movie for the longest time. So just dark.
Yeah.
Oh my god, so good.
So what do you think of American fiction?
I liked it. I liked it. I couldn't find reasons to dislike it. and I thought it was a little stilted, a little over the top sometimes, and it told somewhat predictable story, but the ending was just beautiful. I haven't laughed so hard at a movie in a long time, and that was great. And I said, after I thought about it, because there's only certain kind of movies that I like, and I don't generally go to see race movies or try to learn something from movies like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I reflected on that, I said, this is pretty good. And I went through a whole bunch of black movies, and I said, what's the difference between a black movie and a race movie? And this is a little bit of both. I would have liked it to be a little bit more tragic, but I imagine the screenwriter was younger and he couldn't do that. So that's some of my gripes with the younger generation. They don't do tragedy well. I like a good tragedy.
Right. Yeah. Or subtlety.
Yeah. Like I said, it was a little bit over the top, but even the parts where mom, she's just kind of suffering internally, and you don't really know what's going on. And that was my major criticism. Like I said, if this is going to be a quirky black family, it should be more of a Wes Anderson style movie. And it wasn't quite enough of that for me. They weren't quite quirky enough. They were still trying to be a little bit respectable. And that was the part where he could have gone a little bit darker.
I loved it, and I think it's very much what I always say is like, Joe, this is like a TRM movie. Like this is like, so one of my criticisms was they tried to do too much. Like I think cut one of those storylines, and usually for me, I watch a lot of movies and I review a lot of movies. Like last year, I watched 130 movies from like Oscars to Oscars, and most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the romantic plot line can just get cut. Like it's not necessary. And I thought that was another one here. So if you did that and then you did more for the mom, like you saw more of her, I think that would just like add more space to that. What I loved about this movie, not just what was in it, because I it's one of my top movies of the year, but that a movie like this was recognized at the Oscars, like a movie with this kind of substance. And I thought it was skewering the right people. Like, could you imagine 4 years ago if a movie making fun of like white liberals using the term BIPOC to black people's faces, like that wouldn't get nominated? There's not a chance.
Still,
I think
also,
that's such a shit.
Jada Pinkett Smith, eat your heart out.
Yes. And it's like, and my other criticism was, and I know this is based on a book, so like you can't just like cut entire things all the time. And I haven't read the book, but and I forget her name. I think she's from like Blackish, the mom, but she was the sister who died like in the beginning. By the way, right. Like she was such a great character, and it just kind of sucked that she went so early. That was one of my other things. I really liked her, and then they kind of took her away. My last criticism was, and I say I will always criticize a movie for not having enough Keith David, because to answer your question, if someone was going to play my biopic, it would be Keith David. That's who I would want. He has one of the best. He has one of the best voices in Hollywood, it's like, and they bill him, and then he's in one scene. I think he's only in one scene. Maybe his voice is in a couple others, but he's in one goddamn scene. It's like you have Keith David here. I thought he was going to be a bigger part of the movie.
Yeah, he was the voice of Spawn. I mean, how could you?
Yeah,
he's the best. He's the voice of the president in Rick and Morty, which I don't know if you watch. I'm a huge fan.
Gargoyles or whatever, that cartoon from the 90s.
Oh, he's in Gargoyles?
Yeah.
Dude, I just watched Roadhouse from I'm actually doing back-to-back Roadhouses. So I did 1989's Roadhouse, and now I'm finishing 2024's tonight. Yeah. And he's also building it, and he's like, I'm like, wait, is he the bartender who you barely see? And of course it's like, okay, 1989, he's not, I guess, the same actor, but I'm like, man, like I really wanted more of him. Yeah. So it's kind of tuner. I need to go watch what's that movie?
He was in The Thing, and then
Requiem. Oh yeah, The Thing, or like Requiem for a Dream or something. Yeah. Where it's one of the best lines ever. Where he's like, I didn't take it out to breathe. It's like just one of the best lines ever.
Yeah. That was one of the movies that I let my kids watch. Congo. He was in that.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And that was kind of when he was in his buff prime.
Yeah.
Well, big fan of him. Yeah, so I loved American Fiction. Jeffrey Wright is fantastic, and I definitely can see him for you. And we say all the time, like, there are some actors that I'll just watch their movies. Like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that leads me to watch a lot of shitty Nicolas Cage movies. But still, I'm just gonna watch whatever Nicolas Cage is in.
Yeah.
Like, I just love him.
So what did you guys think? I haven't seen the film, but I definitely want to check it out. But what did you guys think of the overall messaging? Like, obviously, it was kind of from what you guys were talking about, where it was making fun of the sort of woke middle class or upper class white liberal types. Did you think that it was a little too heavy handed at times, or did you think that it was handled fairly, well?
It's always going to be feeling heavy handed for me because I think about that stuff.
Right.
But if you're new to the subject and you've never heard that kind of criticism, which is easy, if you've watched black movies like Tyler Perry or whatever they're supposed to be,
right.
You won't hear this line of argument at all.
Right.
And it was a good, nice, neutral, affluent, black upper middle class family, and that's a nice way to get messages across. And that's kind of new. That's not anything that, right now we live in a post-Wire universe. Everybody says, well, what's the most significant? And they'll say it's The Wire. And I didn't even watch it. I watched it for 3 shows and it didn't do anything for me. And so all these people come out and they say, oh, this great actor, this great plot. And that's the reality of Baltimore. And I'll believe anything you say about Baltimore because it's Baltimore. So, yeah. But yeah.
I just want to say, I think it was heavy-handed but necessary, and I think that's good. Like, I think we needed, because this wasn't like an indie movie that just shot up and all of a sudden got nominated for an Oscar. Like, these were big-name, recognizable actors. And it got, had the budget, like it had everything. And then to have message, and here's the perfect example of a scene that is both heavy-handed, really well done, and necessary. It was when they're doing the vote, and Monk, Jeffrey Wright's character, is on the panel, and it's 5-person panel, and it's 3 white and 2 black, and the 2 black are voting against to have. Of course, and by the way, spoiler alerts, if you haven't seen this movie, is going against to have Monk's book that he published anonymously, so they don't know it's him,
right?
Have it not win, and the 3 white to have it win, and even like the white guy who's supposed to represent kind of like the heterodox, like bad boy, old school white liberal who doesn't, like, even he falls for it, and the woman. And they literally, the way they set it up, they have the 2 black judges on one side of the table, 2 white on the other, and then the white woman who's like the kind of deciding vote. And she looks at them and she goes, I just really think it's important we listen to black voices right now. And the camera stays on them for an extra split second. And I thought that was so well done because it didn't cut right away. It didn't go into another thing. It stayed on them for a split second and then cut to another scene. That's heavy-handed, and it's really, really well done and necessary.
Right.
Yes, because that is the person who stands in for Jeff Bezos's wife.
Yes, exactly. Yes, 100 exactly. But yes, that very.
But the thing that made it so good was the conversation between the 2. When she's having her lunch, and he comes in, and they kind of get it out between themselves in some very good dialogue. That was like the best scene in the movie for me, because they got to disagree. And you understood why, and that was something that Wright did well with his other girlfriend, with his brother. You just kind of find out, oh, this is a black guy who we sympathize with, but he's got problems. But we want him to win, but we understand he's isolated. It's the isolation of genius. Which when you have a sense of integrity and you're not stupid, you got to get through this stuff, and we see it eating him up, and that's something that is rarely seen in film for black men.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at my review right now, and that is one of my lines I say is, I don't feel like that character, I forget her name, but the actress is Issa Rae, and I say that I could have gone for at least one more scene with just the 2 of them exchanging jabs. Like, and I agree, I could have gone for more of that also.
Yep. It was long enough. I mean, when you said that there were big names behind it, they got to shoot more than they needed, and they left a lot in there.
Yeah, I just think it cut one of those storylines maybe, and then you can flesh out some of the others. But overall, like I said, it's one of my favorite movies of the year. I recommend to like anyone. I thought it was just such like kind of like a turning point type movie in culture.
Yeah, I think it'll stand the test of time. That's a good one.
Well, you guys' description of the film reminds me a bit of the conversation that Ben and I had about the movie Tar. That scene that went kind of viral on Twitter, where Kate Blanchett's character is shutting down the young composing, the young composition student who's kind of like, yeah, we shouldn't be studying the works of classical composers. They're all dead white men, sort of thing. And she shuts him down in front of the class. And I remember there was a debate on Twitter where it was like, I agree with her, but at the same time, it felt a little too like the writers were very tuned into the culture war, and they were kind of, so it got a little bit too heavy-handed at some points. Have you guys? I know Ben, you've seen the movie, but have you seen that, Michael? Or
yeah, I loved it. That was a great scene. It was a good setup for the character, how she was, how tough she has to be in that hyper competitive world. I mean, where people sit and play piano for 6 hours a day. It's super competitive. So I really like the character. I think I talked about it with younger people, and they were saying, well, yeah, she kind of deserved to get what she got. And that's kind of my criticism of younger people. And I don't like using generational terms, but I think a lot of people now who grew up with social media, they look for cheat codes, and they don't want to do essay questions.
Right.
And so it's like, is this person good or bad? They can't write an essay about it, but they can say, well, what's the right answer? What's the right answer? Everybody who was helicopter parented has that kind of fatal flaw, because they're not gonna say, well, I could be of two minds about this. It's like, no, this person is inappropriate.
Right.
And that's not a mature judgment.
Well, yeah, I brought up Tar also when we talked about American Fiction before. And what I said was like, yeah, I love that scene. A lot of people like Joe and I were kind of, heralding that scene. But in the end, like, she's the villain. Like, she's supposed to be a villain. And it's like, okay, so are they setting us up where like you're supposed to like her for that, but then she's like a bad person? Where American Fiction, it's like, he's not a villain at all. Like, he's a very sympathetic character. The whole family's sympathetic. There are no way like antagonists, and they're doing these sorts of messages that like we like. So I thought Tar was kind of like a stepping stone. It's like, well, she's maybe, I don't know if villain's the right term, like kind of like at least morally gray, where like these characters, like, no, these are successful, like smart, wealthy people, sympathetic people, and then they have this kind of message. Like, there's no like holes to kind of pick them apart here.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of a failure in general in our society to understand that we shouldn't make the personal political. And that's part of the progressive thing that's in our faces right now. And we don't quite understand, if we're going to be a success in an institution, especially a world-class institution, there's things that you do as a professional, including the politics, that you don't like doing as a person. And you should be able to keep those two things separate. But when they bring your personal life into your professional life, and they crucify your profession because what they perceive of what kind of person you are, that's what breaks our institutions. And I think Tar is an excellent movie for that long-standing message, which is people have to conform to be in, to lead. And you have to leave part of your personality behind. And sometimes you have to make tough decisions. People can lose their jobs. Duh. And so when you try to blend those lines, you get into all kinds of ethical dilemmas. And I still don't think a lot of people can navigate that.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing, because I mean, like, I work for a nonprofit performing arts organization, and they don't know that I do this podcast, so I have to kind of keep these things separate.
Until now,
I know.
Jill, here's your bust. Let's bring her in.
I know.
I'm sure. Have you guys seen The Apartment? The classic movie?
Actually,
Oh yeah, that's the one
on that
where
list.
John Lemon, where he's like,
Is that Shirley MacLaine?
yeah, Shirley MacLaine, yeah.
Yeah.
He's trying to get up the corporate ladder, and he lets his bosses use his apartment as for liaisons. Yeah.
Great movie. Great
Yeah.
movie on the same ethical question.
Right. So actually, so you brought up something interesting. So I want to know if you have a sort of definition for how you define like race movie versus black movie. You brought up that distinction. So do you see the two as different?
Sure. I haven't got a soundbite for that, but basically is like, are we supposed to go home from this movie thinking we've learned something about race relations? Is there a moral lesson here that's separate for the white people and separate for the black people?
Right.
And those are race movies, and mostly they're not well done.
Right.
I mean, and it's so strange because me personally, I can remember when Crash came out in the 90s, and that was everybody was like, "Oh, this is such a good movie," and you're just like, I don't know. My family is kind of an old
Crash
school
that was
family.
like, sorry, the Crash that was like obviously about all the not the J.G. Ballard one.
I don't know who was. I never even went to see it. Just
because there are two movies called Crash, but I think you're talking about the one from the early 2000s where took place in L.A. and had all the different interwoven stories.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay,
yeah, that was.
Yeah. It's just people were calling it the most important movie about race in 100 years, and I'm like, oh shit, here we go. So anyone where they say that, then you know it's a race movie. So to the extent that this was supposed to teach us something about how white people look at black people, and it's so unfair, and it's a minefield, then it's a race movie. And then you have, like in my review, I said, all the white people in here were as two-dimensional as the movie needed them to be, right? So there was nobody else who was even the main character's friend, right? None of those people were his friends professionally, except for his agent. That was the closest one, and he could have been from New Orleans. You can't tell.
Yeah, I think the actor is like Latino. I don't know what was he supposed to be? Was he? I think he said something. He definitely did not consider himself white. I don't remember what it was. I think he was like a Latino guy. But yeah, I thought it was kind of one of those mindfuck things where it's like usually all the white people getting pilloried are like the racist rednecks or the conservatives or like the wealthy wasps or something like this, and this was just like no, they're actually making fun of the people who sit on like book award panels and like New Yorker reading, WAPO subscribing type liberals, and like they're just getting ripped on like the whole movie.
It was specific enough for it to be, but I still say it was a race movie, and the way that they did it. In terms of when he's writing the actual book, having the characters come into real life, that was brilliant.
So you use this. I want to ask about a couple, so we don't just focus on American fiction, which of course we can revisit, but use this term that I like, and I think you use in a few different articles, maybe use it in many. This term, personal deracination.
Deracination,
yeah. Can you kind of explain what that is? It's a great word. So I really like it.
It's still my most popular essay. That's because Instapundit launched it, and basically it's taking your dog out of the game. So I grew up, in a Black nationalist family. I say I'm one half Black nationalist, one half Catholic and one half Jewish. and I am now, 5 or 6 years into my stoicism, and I've given up politics ever since it turned populist. But I grew up, mostly progressive. West LA liberals, you know the deal. And in my family, there's plenty of Ivy League folks. My uncle was a PhD, he was university president. So I'm accustomed to, the Pasadena private school people. So I kind of know the white, liberal, affluent, and rich folks. We know that vibe. My dad used to teach at Antioch. So I guess I'm a little bit more connected to that progressive white liberal thing. I was an Episcopalian. I am an Episcopalian, but the Episcopalian church has gone kind of loopy. So I said, how do I deal with this? For about 5 or 6 years, I said, well, let's see what's going on the right. And I just decided what happened is I was actually at the Sydney Games in Australia, and I watched the American 4x4 100 team. They won the gold medal, and they put the American flag on, and everybody in the stadium boos them. And I said, what is wrong with the idea that Black Americans representing their country in a patriotic way, who prove they're the best in the world, why do they get booed? How can we say that's not? That just struck me so hard. And I said, why don't we like Black patriots? Because we assume that Black people have a permanent gripe with America. Even the most successful Black people should have a gripe with America. And I said, well, Black Republicans don't have that gripe. Let's see what they're all about. And so in 2003, that's why I started blogging. I started blogging on the American right. And I found, half a dozen writers, and I formed something called the Conservative Brotherhood. Fast forward to the Obama phenomenon, and half of the Black conservatives says, oh, we're going to get a Black president. Let's vote for him. And so I realized that it wasn't principle. It wasn't about the principle. It was about Black, some form of Black power. Let's just get whatever power we can have. And then I saw how it all went populist, and he started off being against gay marriage, and then he flipped the script on that. And he said we could have our own doctors, blah, blah, blah. So I just said, American politics has gone populist. The doing this in terms of principle, even in defending liberty, we're not doing that really. We're just leading by poll, and whatever is the most popular thing, that wins. And clearly that's what we've gotten with Biden and Trump. So I just said, how do I keep engaging? And then I came across this quote, and I just love it. A simple moral principle. When a future change is framed as a problem which we might hope our political system to solve, then the only acceptable reason to talk about the consequences of failing to solve that problem is to scare folks in trying harder to solve it. If you instead assume that politics will fail to solve the problem and analyze the consequences of that failure in more detail, not to scare people, but how to work out how to live in that scenario, you are seeing as expressing disloyalty to the system and hostility to all the people who suffer from that failure. So we have lost the ability to say, I abstain.
Right.
So you have to be left, you have to be right. Those become very more narrow. And then all those definitions don't mean anything. So I said, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. And guess what? That applies to race too. I can't be an individual and be respected because everybody's got to put me into their intersectional pretzel. Right?
Yeah.
And they've narrowed their way of thinking about everything so that, if you wear a pussy hat, oh, we know you're cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if you wear an American flag, we know you're suspect. Right. And so that's what we have now. It's like we have to be kind of the samizdat, free speaking, actual free speech, right? Give me liberty or give me, you know, something.
Yeah.
So it was really easy after spending years as a race man to say, these people still believe in race. They feel like they must believe in race. I'm like, you know, racism was invented to justify slavery because we were pushing boundaries of individual liberties at the beginning of this country. And so we said, well, we should be free of tyranny of monarchy. And so we should be self-representative. But we have this slavery thing. How do we work our way around that? We'll think of a pseudoscience and we'll say, well, these people should be slaves. So all men, but these are 3/5 men, you know?
Right.
And so why would we live in the 21st century with these 17th century terms of race? Why can't we just step outside of that? And I find it very interesting that people can't think their way out of the racial box. And that's because everything is politicized. And so you have to have racial politics along with that. So the Republicans are saying, well, this is how we solve the racial problem. And the liberals say, this is how we solve the racial problem. The independents say, this is how we solve the racial problem. Progressives say, this is how we solve the racial problem. So we get all these racial theories. Race is supposed to mean this. And so you get these wars, and they all get published in the Atlantic sooner or later. And then you have, what's his name? Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yep.
He gets to be the spokesman for all of us because he's at the Atlantic or the New Yorker or wherever he was. Right? And how can you defy him? Or how can you defy the scholars at Temple University? Or how can you disagree with Henry Louis Gates? Right? And it's like, it's a search for orthodoxy. And I don't even agree to your basic terminology. I don't even agree to your basic terms.
Yeah.
Right, because it's not just a moral failure; it's an intellectual one where it's like, should we be at the point like we have centuries now of experience of how race has divided us, and so like it still hasn't quite. And I'm sure for many people, like it's probably pretty obvious, but because you know they didn't want to run the risk of getting fired, they're sort of like, yeah, I'll just kind of play along with the diversity thing, sure, fine. But for most, but you know, unfortunately, the ones who still are pushing this divisive racial rhetoric are the ones with the megaphone. So it seems like, you know, well, they're the ones who are speaking the loudest, so they must be the ones who know. But, you know, I think the average person could be like, yeah, you know, we've spent centuries kind of, you know, using race as a way to divide and split us up. Maybe we should stop doing that.
You think?
Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. I want to address a couple things that you said. One that I absolutely agree with was like people just can't abstain anymore. And it's one of my biggest resentments about whatever you want to call it, like, I don't know, today's political climate. But let's say like, honestly, since like, let's say 2015, 2016, is that people used to not give a shit about politics on either side, whatever side. It's like you said, everyone has to then take positions. And I hear people who didn't care about politics at all using terms that like I would never imagine them using, things like woke or talking about Trump's email, like whatever it is. It's like but almost like it's forced that they have to now take a position on this because you have to decide if you're you have to determine, you know, show that you're on one side or the other. And again, this goes for everyone. This goes for all sides.
Sure.
And that is one of my biggest resentments because I feel like it's lowered the quality of life where like,
absolutely,
like politics used to be like for nerds. And I wish it kind of went back to that, but because now culture is politics, and who was it? Breitbart, who, you know, predicted this. He said it was like politics is just downstream from culture. Do I have that backwards? Yeah, politics is downstream from culture. And it's like, yeah, it's annoying that it got to that. Maybe it was inevitable with the internet and just like how that has improved. And then like every generation now is on the internet. First, it was just like one generation. Now everyone's on the internet. So that's just an aside. And I'm glad that you feel the same way, because I think that's just such a detriment to our society at large, is that so many people who didn't care about stuff would vote once every 4 years. And I'm not saying don't be informed. Like, you should be informed and vote. I'm not saying that at all. But it's like all of these cultural issues that people didn't care about. Now, that being said, what I say, I do feel like the right seeded the culture war for years, and they cared about taxes and trade and then they seeded the culture war to a point that I don't want to say no return, because I do think there's a shift and a backlash, and a necessary one, American fiction being an example. But like for a while it was, oh, well, these kind of like progressive loons, they're going to do what the kids of the 60s did. They were protesting Vietnam, and then they became the 80s Reagan Republicans. Like that'll just happen. And it didn't, because those kids who went to Vassar and went to Claremont McKenna, went to all these schools, then went to the HR departments of Fortune 500 companies and became administrators. And they brought that shit with them because it makes them feel good, whether it's detrimental or not, because you feel like, because you were told at minimum for 4 years, maybe at max since you were in grade school, that this is the right side of history. So of course you're going to take that into your late 20s, 30s, and beyond. I do think now the right has realized that we need to fight back. And again, I don't consider myself on the right or the left, really. I feel myself shifting to the right, unfortunately, but that's just like, I don't pick a side, but I do think a balance needs to be struck where we saw one side just take over culture. And I think that's really, really bad. So
yeah. I hear you. And I agree. I think that's a little bit more balanced. Okay. Well, the Claremont Institute is kind of balancing out the McKenna crowd and the Scripps and the Pitzers. So it's tough. I mean, I'm a data engineer. I mean, I was programming before Star Wars, and I've had a nice exit from a startup, and I may go to another one because it wasn't that nice. But I know how people who work with engineering and technology, and their stuff has to work. You have to get through the bugs. You have to be honest about, this is a crap software. We have to fix it. Here's a line of things that we have to fix, and you can't just sit around and twiddle your thumbs and pull your way out of it. So I'm one of those people who defends the philosophy of science, of fallibility, of provability, of standing up and saying, well, I might not be right, but this is my conjecture. What do you think about it? Can you come up with a better solution? So the philosophy of Karl Popper. And so many people are not only illiterate, but innumerate. They don't know how to rational. They don't know what these things mean. They'll and that's especially true with race and crime and all kinds of things. And it's not surprising, given the innumeracy of so many Americans, especially in politics, where we have how many engineers in Congress? 1, 2.
Dude, who's an engineer in Congress?
Yeah, I know. That's the question. And
all these damn lawyers, get them out of here. I'm actually a lawyer, but I'm a self-aiding lawyer.
Yeah.
Right. So it's weird because we just don't get to the objective truth. We don't find it. We find people emphasizing optics over logic. And there's a very affluent, wealthy, and educated class of people who have their BAs from Middlebury, and they can't do it any better.
Right.
And so they go with the flow, and academics and postdocs go where the grant money says to go. And there's just this kind of corruption. And so is it a surprise that, Elon Musk is saying, beam me up, Scotty. Matter of fact, I'm going to make my own beam, and I'm leaving because you guys have sold global warming around the globe, and none of you can read any scientific papers of any, and you don't know how to gauge in the scientific process. So you step out of it because your stuff works, but then you feel sorry for people who just don't get it. And I find myself, especially in Free Black Thought, just reminding people that the earth is flat, or the earth is not flat. Sorry. But you just have to spend too much time, right?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
There's not an AP American politics. You're in with everybody else. And they're all equal, and there's no bonus for being smarter.
Right.
You just have to go with the low-lying
It is both a blessing and a curse that everyone gets one vote.
No.
The dumbest of us and the smartest of us all get the same amount of votes.
Right.
It's unfortunate sometimes. I was told a few years ago that objective truth was racist. Is that so? Are you saying
Well,
that?
of course, that's the strategy.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I found that so like I don't know if you remember the
Smithsonian thing.
Yes, was it in DC where it has like that flow chart of white supremacy, and it was like punctuality and objective truth and scientific method. I'm like, that is so goddamn racist that you're gonna call like that. You're gonna say these things are white supremacy, and they're just like overall like good qualities and things that have a society function. That was, and even they were like, all right, I think we went too far with this, and they
took it down.
Yeah. Well, thank God for Nigerian immigrants.
Yeah. Well, getting back to your point about how how bad we are at reading numbers. I mean, like I remember when Obama, when he was in office and he was talking about the gender wage gap, and like that was just like he cited like just one statistic that was like 80 women make 80% for every dollar a man makes or whatever, or 80 cents for every dollar a man makes. But it's like if you conduct even just like a simple multivariate analysis, you get a much more complex picture. But that's the thing, right? It's just politicians are not very good at that. They're not really good. Let's break down the data and look at this from multiple angles and see exactly where the disparity actually is coming from. No, we want these the sloganeering is the currency right now.
Yeah, you soundbite your way through. Mm-hmm. You check out the polls, and you work out some horse trading compromise, which has nothing to do with better policy.
Right.
So like when you were talking before, because again, I wanted to address another point that you made. So it's like, what are my view is if we're going to progress as a society, and I mean that in the least political way, right? Just progresses and improve. I'm a big fan of Coleman Hughes, and we're actually both like from the same area of New Jersey, so represent. And he has a new book out, and I haven't read it yet. It's on my list. I have I'm ready to I'll probably do the audiobook, but I know he's been kind of making the not just podcast rounds. Actually, he was on The View even going into enemy territory. I think he's brilliant. I always forget how young he is too. Like
I know
he's like 17. Yeah, it's like but anyway, his whole thing is colorblindness. And I want to know. And I read one of your pieces on it. And I want for the podcast to hear kind of your views on this. If you think this is really the route to go, and it's not. And before you begin, like what Coleman says, it's not like ignoring race, like that's just this misconception of what is it. And it's not even denying that racism exists in many different forms. It's well, how do we improve society? And this is the only way to do it. So, with that, what are your views? And if you're familiar with kind of his positions and his thesis?
Yeah. I've about 6 years ago when Toni Morrison said that Ta-Nehisi Coates is our new James Baldwin. I said, okay, I don't want to be a black writer anymore.
Like what is? I know she's extremely highly regarded. I've read one of her books, but I mean, come on, James Baldwin was incredible. Like, Go Tell It on a Mountain is such a good book.
Even so, no matter what it is, I was very glad when Coleman Hughes came around. I said, okay, good. I don't have to do this stuff anymore. Because I'm sure that my instincts and my talk about this, because I had a blog where I get thousands of hits a day, and people were reading my stuff, and it's a great way to learn what everybody wants to argue about, and then work your way through that stuff. But I met him, and he's a nice guy, and he's very careful in his speaking. Because he's surfing the big wave, and nobody wants to see him wipe out. But as a young person, he can't be cranky like Christopher Hitchens. At some point after his third or fourth book, then he's going to start shooting back, and that's going to be fun. But right now, He's got to be nice.
His composure is just like if I were him and you saw on the View, I don't know if you saw the clip of him on the View, but when that woman turned to him and just had like this ad hominem attack and basically like just slandering him to his face, I would have been like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like,
I know.
and he's just so cool and collected. I'm envious of it because I could not do that.
Yeah. We could use a little Spike Lee from him.
Yeah.
But yeah. As I've been thinking about colorblindness, because I was at a conference about a year ago, and that's when he kind of put that idea out there to the applause of many. I was thinking, when I grew up and I went to high school in the 70s, I came from a Black nationalist family, and we used to have long, hot summers. Summer of 68, summer of 69, there'd be 150 plus violent race riots every summer in this country. And by the time of the bicentennial, we were sick of it. We were like, can we cross over? Can we get along? Let's figure out how we can do this. And we did it without a theory. We just said, this race madness is too much. Let's not do that. Let's figure a way to make friends. Let's get to know each other. And I think my generation did that. If you graduated in high school before the 80s, you did that. Before Baki became a thing, it was you're recognizing that I have made an effort. And if you look back at the bicentennial, you'll see all the red, white, and blue posters with the black hand shaking the white hand. And that was all the murals all around the place. And so I said, I think we did something different that they haven't been able to replicate. So maybe we made colorblindness work because we saw the alternative. But now we get to the point where the heroes aren't King or Thurgood Marshall. They're like Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin represents Black people. George Floyd represents Black people. And then so something bad happens and life is tragic. Something bad always happens. And people say, oh, now we have to rethink everything. We have to have a racial reckoning. People have to pay. And so that's the new racial theory. We talk about white fragility. We talk about white privilege. We talk about, let's rename Black people. We're not Afrocentric anymore. Nobody wears kente cloth. Well, even the Nancy Pelosi can wear kente cloth and take a knee in the rotunda.
It was unbelievable. It's one of my favorite moments in
American history.
Yeah, it is. It's so great.
Right. And then even when Trump was talking about the lawsuit about statues in Charlottesville, saying there are good people on both sides of the lawsuit, people took that completely wrong. Oh, well, obviously he's siding with the Klan. So everybody had to, make it into this reckoning.
And I mean, he was right about the statue. Look, because I as much as I'm like a New Jersey supremacist, New Orleans is my favorite city in America. I love it. I lived there for a little. And I was a big proponent of taking down the Confederate monuments. And actually, to this day, I do believe in taking down Confederate monuments. To me, they were enemies of the United States, and they lost, and they should come down. That being said, Trump, to his credit, said, first they're going to come for these, then it's going to be Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln. And it's true. They took down Abraham Lincoln in Wisconsin. They just took down Thomas Jefferson in City Hall in New York City. And I mean, you got to give him credit. He was right about that stuff.
And that's common sense.
Yeah. And it feels like there's no guardrails that people can't. I mean, it's I don't know why I'm trying to redefine it. It's the slippery slope argument.
Yeah.
It's first. And I'm someone who can go, no, these should come down. Like Robert E. Lee never stepped foot in New Orleans. They put up his statue because of white supremacy, because they want a big middle finger to recently freed Black people. New Orleans is one of the first cities. Actually, there were Black people and slaves in New Orleans, and it was one of the first cities to have a free Black neighborhood, the Treme. And it was a big middle finger to say, you're not equal to us. That should come down. But Thomas Jefferson should not come down. Abraham Lincoln should not come down. And there seems to be like, no, it's either all or nothing. It's either if you don't believe they should come down, then you're like a redneck white supremacist, and or they all have to come down, and there's not that like middle ground.
Well, I have a theory I call 6 pounds of racism, and the question is, can you handle 6 pounds of racism? How much is that? I don't know. But some people, if they're at Harvard undergraduate and they have to hold up the sign, I too am Harvard, 6 pounds of racism breaks their neck, traumatizes them, and makes them feel aggressed. And then they have to be reactionary for 7 years until they rage it out. Other people eat 6 pounds of racism for breakfast. I have cousins who live in Stone Mountain, Georgia, and it is a nice middle-class Black neighborhood with fall, autumn leaves coming down, kids riding their bikes. I looked around and I said, this place is great. And then I see, oh, there's the biggest Confederate monument in the world.
Right.
But they're cool.
Yeah.
So it hasn't destroyed anybody's ego. It's like the Black family persists. Black people succeed. And America's not that bad a place.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
people who don't know 500 Black people, you got to know at least 500 Black people. Then you don't have to take movies and TV seriously, right? Because it's hard. We're not everywhere. It's hard to get to know that many Black people of every class, of every religion, of every economic status, of every level of education. And then you can say, okay, I know something about Black people, and I know it's going to hurt these Black people over here. And then I could represent them as representing all Black people. Well, this is horrible. It's going to make those Black people so, it's going to hurt them. But over here, they're going to shake it off and go about their business, And it's always, interestingly enough, the nice, affluent Ivy League ones who are just too good to be insulted, who will make the most noise when they are racially insulted. I can't believe, don't you know who I am? And those people would be published in the letter section of the Atlantic magazine. And you can say, see, it happened to Magic Johnson. It happened to Michael Jordan. It happened to Tiger Woods. What would happen to you? And you're just overemphasizing what's just making Tiger Woods uncomfortable.
Right.
But Tiger Woods is one person who kind of doesn't play the game. He said, I'm Kabbalah Asian. I'm not any of this stuff. He said, and that's the smart thing to do.
Right.
And when somebody says, well, as a white guy, I know, I'm like, well, how white do you want to be? Why are you claiming that?
Very.
Yeah.
Or, well, as a white guy, I can never say nigger. I said, go ahead, say it. And you
Not
can't.
taking the bait.
You can't. It's just like, it's blasphemy. And that means how it's as deep as your Christian sensibilities. That's how deep it is.
Right.
And you have to admit, Americans have it that deep.
Right.
But some of us, we don't give a shit. Just go ahead and do what you're going to do. You're not hurting me.
Right.
Well, OJ famously said, I'm not Black, I'm OJ.
Yeah, when that DA came down, he was in the hood, boy.
Well, it's interesting about the concept of colorblindness is that, I mean, it's not a new idea. I mean, as much credit as Coleman Hughes deserves for like really repopularizing it, this predates him by decades. So I mean, like at the very least. So I wrote an article that was actually published in Free Black Thought, and it was about Jimi Hendrix, who's one of my biggest influences. And it was these are excerpts from, I think, diary entries and interviews from when he was alive, and he died in 1970. So I have a quote from him here. He says, "Race isn't a problem in my world. I don't look at things in terms of races. I look at things in terms of people. I'm not thinking about Black people or white people. I'm thinking about the obsolete and the new. There's no color part now, no black and white." And so I thought that was just fascinating, where it's just sort of like, this is a Black man saying this in a time when things were considerably worse for Black people, like, late 1960s, but he still had the guts to just be like, yeah, I don't care about race, dude. I'm just trying to make music and I like meeting people. And it's just like, so it's like, that was probably more revolutionary then, but now it seems like we've forgotten that.
It's a matter of character, but it's also a matter of psychological strength, which is kind of what I was trying to get to.
Right.
Some people are literally fragile, but some people are robust. Some people can handle it. You're not going to tear them down. Some people are always seeking approval in the eyes of other people.
Right.
And you can't make that into a racial essentialism. Oh, that's a Black person who's trying to get along with white people. something's wrong with him. Maybe he just needs affirmation wherever he can get it. And that's a psychological mental health kinds of question.
Right.
So, I also say I'm O positive. That makes me the majority of blood type in the world. 35% of the billions of people on this planet are O positive. But I don't go around saying I'm O positive. It's objectively true about me, but I don't take that as a significant part of explaining my behavior or my capacity or my ability. I'm not going to go around and telling you that, but some people will go around. I'm a Capricorn.
Right.
I'm a typical Capricorn.
Yeah.
And they will tell you that.
Yeah.
So people have a choice of what attributes are true about them that they'll cop to.
Right.
And if the more people cop to race, the more they're going to be stuck in the same bag. There's no escape. You don't get to switch the roles. You don't get to say the blacks are greedy and they run all the media, and you can't say, yeah, I can't even think of a clean stereotype.
Right. but
you step into the box and there's no escape.
Right.
Until you personally become psychologically strong enough to defy it.
Well, the mental health thing is especially interesting because so I watched the documentary that came out recently, the Coddling of the American Mind. I actually saw it with Jake Mackey. But it's fascinating because obviously they point they blame a lot of like recent like helicopter parenting as a prime example for why so many young people are affected by things like microaggressions and implicit bias and all that sort of stuff. But they also point to like how pernicious like the woke ideology and its pernicious influence on young people as well, where it's sort of like, there are young people who are like, yeah, I don't care about race or gender or sexuality. I'm just trying to do my own thing, just figure out my place in the world. But then when they get sucked into, certain online circles and they're constantly being bombarded with this message of, well, you're of this race, therefore things are worse for you, or you're this gender and things are bad for you. Or if you're of this sexuality, then you must be suffering. And they go, shit, maybe I am oppressed. Right. And so next time somebody makes a joke about this, I should call them out. And I should call my HR person. If I'm having Thanksgiving with my uncle and he says something, I should call him out in front of my family. I think you're definitely onto something there, like regarding the mental health and the sort of mental resilience part of it.
Yeah. But then, it's, I think something that American patriots have, especially those who survived the Cold War like me, they say, well, what Marxist social work is, useful idiots. These are people who are not dealing with the real world. And so they can live in that bubble where they say, this is oppression, this is stuff. I'm like, nobody who can do 10 pull-ups talks like that. Right? Yeah. Nobody who has served as a first responder or an EMT thinks like that. You only think like that when you went to this particular liberal arts college and you took this one class. And that's what you read in the Atlantic. So there's we don't know how bad it can get, but I expect the pendulum will swing back. Hopefully not too far, but you just have to kind of have a sense of humor about how dumb people can be.
I think the pendulum is swinging back for the most part. I think if Trump gets elected again, I don't know what'll happen. That might be the extent of the pendulum. I don't know. I am concerned, like you said, not too far, because I do see some of the right starting to do some of the same things that the left were doing for years, where there's just the bridge collapse in Baltimore, and you have the mayor get up there, and it's, I don't know, late at night, he's in like a jacket, he's a young guy, he kind of has an accent, and everyone's saying like, oh, this is the DEI mayor, this is, you're basically saying like, look at this young black guy. And I'm like, what the, like, first of all, don't you want someone who, like, I don't know, is representative of the people? He was elected, like he wasn't appointed. And that's very strange to me that there's a tragedy. People died. Like, there's a tragedy that happens in this guy's city. And right away you're talking about like how he's not qualified for the job without any evidence of that. Like, that's very, like, like social Marxists, whatever you want to call them. That's what they did for years. And I am afraid that the right, by kind of contradicting myself here by saying you have to fight back in the culture war, but they're fighting back adopting the same kind of tactics that the left use. That is like lack of evidence, just attack identity, even if it's just like the reverse. And it honestly just does sound like racism. And I do like that. To me is like, whoa, like we need to pause it here. Like there's plenty of crazy DEI crit woke shit out there. Don't put it in everything, because that's like what the left does when they put racism in everything when it's not there, and doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But in a lot of these places, sexism, racism, transphobia, whatever is not there, and they put it there. Well, you guys are doing the same thing now. You're just calling it DEI, and that is one of my concerns.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, the parallel is perfect, because that's what happened to Ray Nagin with Katrina.
Yeah.
And as soon as General Honore got in there, everybody's like, this is the man. So I know enough military stuff to be dangerous. And the guy that I follow a lot of military bloggers, etc. A guy named Ward Carroll. And then he has a guy who talks about shipping, knows everything about shipping. I mean, and he was like, there should be an incident commander there who understands river traffic, somebody from the Coast Guard. And when you put elected official, they're not necessarily the best person to know the logistics of how to fix this emergency. So I buy that argument. It's not a racial argument. It's about who is actually capable of doing this kind of stuff. And it becomes very clear if that person now, just to combat the idea that the right's being racist, then we have to find a black person in the Coast Guard who could do that kind of stuff. And it's you can't get away from it.
Yeah. My issue is the mayor didn't come out and was like white supremacy caused the bridge collapse. Like, no, he came out and he was just saying normal, understandable things in an accent. He's a young black guy. And everyone's like, oh, it's like, what? Like, guys, that does not look good. And I'm not saying like this was my tribe or whatever. I don't associate with a side. I give myself very few titles. I don't belong to a political party. I'm definitely not voting for Biden. Probably not. I mean, I'm an RFK supporter. So like, I have no like tribe. So to me, it was like, this is going too far. And I don't want to see the I don't want to see the I don't know, periphery of this. Like, I don't want to see how far this goes, because that's also going to look ugly and will only lead to an equally ugly leftward swing. If they can,
the DEI backlash is going to be around.
Yeah.
And it's current. Somebody who claims to speak for black women executives is saying the Claudine Gay thing is echoing around all the black women that I know. And like, you only know the black women that you know. So what do you really know? That's kind of my theory. Black people only know the black people that they know. And then everybody thinks you give them a microphone and they can represent black folks.
Well, I always found it very strange when it's like, I don't know. I always found it like, okay, black people in Harlem or Westchester County, and black people in Atlanta, and black people in Houston, and like, they're not all the same. Like, there's culture, and to put everyone the same, it's like the black. It's like, no, these are all different people, different values, different religions. Like, and I always found that so because like we don't do that really with other people.
No,
like and I never. I don't know. I always had a knee-jerk
colorblindness will help.
Yeah.
Because I spent some time in West Orange.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of my
Actually,
family.
I have cousins. That's kind of my joke. Everywhere I go, I was like, "Oh, I have a cousin who lives around here." So I actually have some cousins that live like right up behind Thomas Edison's house, and that's a pretty swanky neighborhood.
Yes, well, that's Llewellyn Park. Yeah, that is a very, very nice neighborhood.
Yeah, he's in real estate.
Yeah,
he did pretty well for himself. But isn't there in the little small town, there's like a place that does great French toast? What is that place?
Oh, I don't know. No, I'm from a town that borders West Orange that is known for a deli. That's
Okay.
I'm actually going there tomorrow for the first time in a while because I live down near Atlantic City now.
Okay.
But
Well, that's way out.
yeah, that's my area, and that's where Coleman's from, Montclair, which is like Montclair's like the cool kid of the area.
Yeah, Montclair.
Everyone loves Montclair. Yeah, well, I get it. Everyone loves Montclair. They have indie film this, the new Ethiopian restaurant, everything.
Yeah.
It's a very, very cool town. It has like 4 train stations. Yes, I get it. Everyone loves Montclair.
Yeah, it's horrid. I worked for a finance company over there, and their building looked like that building on the Netflix thing where they split your personality so you couldn't remember where you came from.
Oh yeah.
When you go to work, yeah, that was.
What was that? I forgot his name. But anyway, yes, I know what you're saying. Where it's like you kind of clock in and you're like a different person.
Yeah. So I know that part of New Jersey too.
That's my part of New Jersey. Well, not anymore, but that's where I'm from.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Anything else you want to touch on, Michael? And I'll even say I won't even consult with Joe. We would love to have you back sometime.
Yeah.
Cool. Because I want to talk about. I think somebody just brought up the one that I kind of really want to talk about, because I wouldn't say I'm a men's movement guy, but I have seen how beards have come into fashion. Lots of things. I pay attention to that, and I'm definitely I'm the oldest of 4 boys in my family, so I'm used to being man's man, patriarch. Went to all boys school, wrestle, fight, that kind of stuff, and I curse and drink, and I'm drinking Balvenie right now.
Yeah.
So, and so I wanted to talk about kind of the Lovecraftian hero.
I read that article. I saw that because I'm a huge fan of Lovecraft. So yeah.
And it's like that's the kind of person that we need in this country, who's ready to suffer, who's ready to face the Balrog, and just say, I can't let the bad guys get away with it.
Yeah.
Right. And what you guys were talking about, Christopher Rufo, sometimes somebody's got to get up there and fight.
Yeah. I've become a bigger fan of him. Like, I don't know. At first, I thought he might be doing. I'm like, I like, and even he has some like temperance, and I appreciate that. And he's like, no, I feel like he gets smeared more. That like when you actually listen to him, he's actually very erudite and like has like a good idea of like what needs to happen more than just like philosophically, which is important too. I think some people like James Lindsay and even Jordan Peterson, they've kind of like, I don't know, maybe lost the plot. I think they've gone a little too like they've gone down the spiral too much. Or Chris Rufo seems a little more level-headed and just like kind of strategic, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, so we need a new kind of men's club.
Yeah,
because some institutions are just effed up right now.
Yeah.
And so we need the fundamental currency of civilization is trust. And if you can't trust anybody, you're going to spend all your time tearing down whatever's out there. Or you're going to go kissing whatever ass is out there. And so I think we pay attention to exceptional people, whether they're filmmakers or authors. And those are the men and women that we need.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to embrace them and support them. Their character and their virtue will shine through. And that's what's going to get us through. People who can handle the truth.
So why don't we, while we follow each other now on social media, why don't we set up another episode? I don't know, maybe this summer or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on your schedule, but we loved having you on. Do you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
I'm at mdcbowen.substack.com. That's Stoic Observations. I write 2 others. One for Tessellations, that's my outreach to STEAM kids, and Human Race Man, which is my deracination and 1,000 stories about answering stupid questions about race. And then of course,
Human Race Man, that's good.
And of course at Free Black Thought with the Free Black Thought podcast that I do with Wink Twyman, Bowen and Twyman, Free Thoughts with Bowen and Twyman. And mdcbowen.info will get you to all of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Michael. And yeah, we'll definitely
Great,
have to have you come on again.
Yeah.
And yeah, that especially with regards to masculinity, that's I think that's really fascinating topic for us to touch on. So
we love having guests come back on because we don't have a lot of friends. So
all right, everybody, stay reckless.
Fight the
And
crits.
yeah, take care.
Fight them all weekend.